Welcome to Job Sharing and Beyond, the Future of Work podcast that goes beyond the traditional 9 to 5. I am Karin Tischler, speaker, consultant, and host of the show, where we hear from global experts every other week to discover innovative solutions and tips on how to remain a relevant employer in the future. Hello, everybody. Today's podcast episode is the audio podcast from the LinkedIn Live conversation I had with my guest, Aoife O'Brien. Aoife was the podcast guest at the beginning of this year, and Aoife shared back then some of the research results from her master thesis, Fitting in at Work. We talked about this, and we talked about an aspect, trust and psychological safety at work, which was something she started to get into towards the end of her thesis. Besides that, we also talked about flexible work, in particular looking at 4-day work week as well as hybrid work, because especially hybrid work, when we last spoke, had not really been as much in everybody's mind as it is at this point in time. Aoife also gave her favorite book title, which I will put in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I did talking to Aoife today. And now, without further ado, here is our conversation. Hello, Aoife. How are you?
Hi, Karin. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How is everything?
Great. We're having a really great weather spell here in Ireland at the moment. I was going to say you guys use Celsius as well in Canada, so you'll know what I mean when I say, but you might not appreciate it, just how warm it is. It's getting up like 25, 26, 27 degrees, which is unheard of here in Ireland. So it's brilliant. And I'm taking as much advantage as I can by going for dips and having barbecues and, getting this amount of hot weather day after day is a very rare occasion here in Ireland. So I'm having a great time at the moment.
Well, that's awesome. Now, for anybody listening to us right now, I'd be very curious to find out, where is everybody located? And could you please put that in the comments? Now, Aoife, you've been my podcast guest in the past. For people who don't know you, could you introduce yourself? And I've been asking people to use the working out loud method, basically telling 5 facts about you, please.
Amazing. Yeah. No, I love that. And I liked the example that you used. So I'm going to borrow from your example, Karin. So my name is Aoife O'Brien. And interestingly, I think anyone from outside of Ireland won't really know how to pronounce my name necessarily. So I tell people to read it backwards. So it's pronounced as if it's EFA, but it's spelled AOIFE. And I'm the founder of Happier at Work, which also includes the Happier at Work podcast, which you've also been a guest on, Karin. So thank you for that. I speak and I consult and I coach on all things relating to happiness at work, but very specifically on the area which we're going to talk about in more detail in a few minutes, this concept of fit and how people fit in at work because of some work experiences that I had. So it's using the research that I did for my master's in organizational behavior, looking at values, needs, and strengths. I have lived, I actually don't know, I should have probably counted how many countries I've lived in so far, but I have lived in and worked in Dublin, London, Perth, and Sydney in my professional career. And then when I was at university, I also lived in Germany for a summer. I lived in Barcelona for a year on Erasmus, and I lived in America twice. I lived once in Chicago for a summer, and I lived also in Montauk in Long Island for the summer as well. Yeah, so quite a bit of traveling done in between all of those, for sure.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing. And as you have alluded, in our conversation on our episode, we talked about your master's thesis and all the research you had done about fitting in at work. And so I'm very curious, since then, what has happened in that field of your focus?
Yeah, really, really, really great question, Karin. And it's the weekend just gone by marked a year since I submitted my dissertation. So, I was thinking back on everything that's happened in that last year. I think for me in particular, it's really solidified and brought into focus how I can use that information to help organizations. So I have designed a Happier at Work program that I can take people through, which is, it's really, really exciting to be able to do that and see what's going on with my clients. And it's all based, I'm a total and utter data nerd. I love everything to do with data, and whether it's using the data that exists already in organizations or conducting surveys and doing my own research. I just love all things data related. So seeing clients get those types of results as well from taking part in the Happier at Work program, where you're going from, okay, how are things at the moment? And I know that we will be speaking about this, but the idea and what we had spoken about on your podcast as well was this idea of psychological safety and trust. And I'm incorporating that into it because I think it's a really, really core part of creating happier work environments, or at least it's a really strong indicator as to whether or not people are happy at work, whether they can speak up, whether they see things as a learning opportunity rather than a failure, and things like that. So bringing that into it as well. And I suppose at the top of everything, it's this idea of leadership. And for me, the core part of leadership is self-awareness and knowing what you're good at, knowing the impact that you have on other people as well.
That's so interesting. And it really is. I remember us talking about how trust was an aspect of research that towards, I guess, the end of your thesis, you were like,
it's too late to add it all in now.
Exactly. You sort of ran out of time. And that now more and more that in conjunction with the psychological safety is being, I see it much more frequently. And then every time I think about you and your research.
Yeah. Interestingly, I read an article just this morning. I kind of more skimmed through it. I want to go and read it properly, but it was by Amy Edmondson. So she'd be one of the kind of key people who speaks on psychological safety. But she was speaking or writing in particular about the impact that remote or hybrid working is going to have, and the types of conversations that managers are going to have that previously they might have shied away from. So things like, without crossing any kind of work privacy boundaries, asking people about their situations at home in order to facilitate things at work. Because, she was saying it's a lot of it is the role of the manager is to create this environment for people to succeed, essentially. And so the manager will be responsible for managing the hybrid schedule, if you like, and needing to take into consideration all of the different aspects and all of the different elements and attitudes and situations that people are in order to be able to manage that schedule.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you mentioned, the hybrid work model that, when we were talking originally, it might have come up a little bit, but it really wasn't as much talked about. And it's really becoming more and more sort of like, the future model. But as you were saying, there are so many aspects to consider, and also from a discrimination, or avoiding that all of a sudden
Exactly.
you have
Yeah.
a two-class
Yeah.
worker system, right?
Yeah. Like, and one of the things that she called out was unintentional bias. So people don't set out necessarily to be biased against any
Right.
one particular demographic, but it kind of sits in your subconscious, like, oh, can I give Karin a promotion? Because if I give her more responsibility, maybe she'll need more time with her kids, or whatever the situation might be. This is the reality at work. And I think, I don't currently work in a large corporate organization, so I don't have that firsthand experience of what it's like to be doing that work at the moment. But there are lots and lots of different factors that need to be considered. And I think one of the key things is getting it right, is kind of having those conversations with people and finding out what it is that they need. And having the psychological safety to be able to do that within the team, and taking on board all of these different factors that are happening. And like, for me, it's about flexibility. It's about focusing on outcomes. And I know we've spoken at length about flexibility in the past, Karin, but really getting clear, and I can't emphasize this enough, I think, but from the top, being really, really clear on the purpose of your business. And that cascades down then to the different levels within the organization, and what the purpose of each of the teams is. And then the responsibility of managers is to link the purpose to the overall organizational purpose, the organizational goals, and to be set really, really, really clear expectations for each person within the team. And beyond that, linking what people do on a day-to-day basis with what the organization is trying to achieve as a whole. So I, as an individual contributor, know the impact that I'm having on the organization. And if you can make that link with clients as well, so the impact that I can have on an end client if I'm not directly dealing with end clients as well. So being able to make those really, really clear for individual contributors, but also setting clear expectations and holding people to account. So this is what we expect from you. These are the outcomes, outcome 1, 2, 3. Let's check in every 3 months to discuss how you're getting along, where you need support. And for individuals to be free to say, this is where I need support, without fear of judgment and being reprimanded, all of those kind of things, where people don't speak up because they think that that it's a poor reflection on them. So creating those environments, I think, where people set really clear expectations, but then they're held to account. So if they're not meeting what the expectations that have been set out for them, then it's exploring that, but kind of in a non-blame way, so exploring what additional support they need, what was the reasons. So rather than looking for like who messed up this time, it's about what did we learn from this experience and what can we do differently going forward.
Yeah, and it is so interesting because, we first met because I was doing research about Charlotte Lockett, who is one of the co-founders of the 4-day week global. And basically, we both interviewed her. That's how, we met each other. But what I felt was so interesting with their concept to reduce work from a 5-day, 8 hours down to a 4-day, 8-hour. One of it is to really evaluate all the processes. And it sort of goes right to what you just described, the importance of why are we doing things? And also, why do we have to have, let's say, 10 people in a meeting? Is that really necessary? And do we even have to have the meeting? So it's really interesting.
That, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of points that I'd love to build on there. We'll maybe touch on the meeting thing first of all, because that's something that I can even apply in my own business. I think about like, what is the purpose of this meeting? And I have people asking me for meetings all the time. Let's go for an online coffee, all of this kind of stuff. And it's about being really clear on what the purpose of the meeting is. Like, what do I stand to gain? What does the other person stand to gain? And is it worthwhile having this meeting at all? But I think in the corporate context, it is about really thinking of who needs to be here. What is the purpose of the meeting? And I think there's like maybe 4 or 5 different things. Like, is it a discussion? Is it a decision that needs to be made? Is it for sharing information? And if it's for sharing information, is that the most appropriate way to share it? Or could you, and you hear this cliche so many times, that meeting could have been an email. If it's purely to share information, can you put that information into some sort of communication and send it out to people, depending on what the message is, obviously. Sometimes there's stuff that's quite sensitive and it can't really be shared in an email, but thinking about that as well. The other aspect is the concept of outcomes that we were kind of talking about, and being really, really clear about what those outcomes should be. And the idea of productivity and being really, really focused. So, when it comes to productivity, eliminating unnecessary meetings, but really focusing. And if I just think of today, for example, myself, and getting distracted by things that are not necessarily that important, which is why it's so important to understand, why are we here? What's the purpose? And what are the outcomes of a business of any size? So it's not just for kind of corporate. I can apply that in my own, and maybe, practice what I preach and take some more time to reflect on what's working well and what's not, and where I need a bit more clarity, and how I'm getting distracted and where I'm getting distracted. I'm trying to go easy on myself at the moment, because I had my second jab yesterday for the COVID vaccine. I'm actually feeling okay today. I went for a run this morning and everything, but also because it's summertime, great weather. And let's not forget, we're still in a global pandemic, no matter how you shape it, we're kind of at the tail end. And I think when we spoke initially about it, exactly that, Karin, like, we weren't talking about hybrid work models. That hadn't really emerged at that stage. We were kind of more talking about things like, we're still in this pandemic, and what does the future of work look like? And we're never going back to the way things were, because we've learned far too much from what has happened, and the fact that people can actually work from home and they can work remotely and actually be more productive. In fact, the difficulty is kind of going the other way and working too much and finding it really difficult to switch off at the end of the day, because your laptop is sitting there, and it could be in the same place where you eat. It could be in the same place where you sleep or where you relax. Or if you're one of the lucky ones and you have a completely separate office, then go you, that's fantastic. But for the most part, I think people, their laptop is sort of facing them, and the temptation then is to continue working.
Yeah, I completely agree. From my own experience, I can say that definitely. Now, Eva, what do you feel like, looking forward, sort of the next 6 to 12 months from talking to your clients in general? Where do you think what's going to happen is the main point, sort of like looking at future of work?
Yeah, really, really, really good point. And I think there's probably a few things that I can see that are happening and that are going to happen and going to need to happen. I think the pandemic exposed managers who are not very good at managing people as not very good managers. Whether they want to be good managers or not is kind of another story. So, like, people who were really good and effective managers excelled despite the pandemic, but those who were not particularly good managers, their poor management style, let's say, has been exposed during this pandemic. And I think that's one thing. So either, I think there's an opportunity for people to decide whether they want to be managers or not, or for organizations to present a different path to them as an option, like to be a specialist in a specific area. Another big challenge is that I think, and you'll have heard the term, I'm sure, the talent tsunami or the great resignation. I think people are really considering what is important to them in their life, not just in their career, but in their life generally speaking. And they want to have a greater sense of fulfillment at work. Part of that might be that they want a degree of flexibility, and they will choose to work for an organization that gives them that flexibility. And if the organization that they're currently in is not offering that flexibility, and I've seen some organizations publicly state that they are not going to offer flexibility, and I've seen others kind of stating that they are definitely going to support flexibility. I mean, there's other complications to do with where you live and how you get taxed. I know certainly in Ireland, I'm sure it's the same in Canada. I'm sure it's the same in the US, that if you live abroad, then you need to abide by those foreign tax rules, and then you might become a foreign employee, which has all sorts of implications. I'm not an employment lawyer. I don't know what those implications are, but I do know that it causes issues, because certainly in Ireland, there's a lot of foreign workers who work in normally it's like the EMEA headquarters here in Dublin. And so a lot of the foreign workers opted to go home to their home country when the pandemic broke out. But they were kind of, at the time, it was kind of like 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Okay, that's extended and extended and extended. But it got to about, I think, between 4 and 5 months. And they realized that they would be foreign tax residents if they didn't call people back to Dublin to return back to Dublin. So I know that it caused a few complications. So that the second part is that kind of greater sense of fulfillment at work, and the first part being that giving managers maybe the option as to whether or not to be managers. I think building on that first point, training managers to be more effective. So a lot of the conversations that I have with my clients will be around, and I think when I was starting my business, I didn't fully grasp this, but it's around creating those, like helping the managers to create those better environments. I kind of thought it's the organization as a whole, and it's helping individuals to understand themselves, but it's not. It's really empowering managers to create those happier work environments firstly by understanding themselves, but being able to have those sometimes difficult conversations with their employees about what it is that they need from work. What do they need? Why are they doing this? And really, personalizing the work experience. That's another thing that I see happening, is it's not just about like, oh, everyone gets this benefit, but it's personalizing it in such a way that I don't think, oh, well, Karin has extra days off in the summer to be with her kids. Why does Karin get that and I don't? It's making it really clear that that's not satisfying my needs, because I don't need that additional time, but I get benefits in other ways, like whether it's a gym membership, or it could be like days off at Christmas, or something that's kind of equivalent, but personalized to me, which it again might be an administrative nightmare, but I think it's something really important and ties in with the research that I did for my dissertation about the importance of satisfying our needs at work.
Well, thank you so much, Eva. You know that just came full circle. So thank you. And now, before we go, I'd love to know, could you share your favorite book with our audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. A good few years ago, I read this book called Enough by a gentleman called John Naish, and I hope I haven't butchered his name. It's spelled Naish, and it's called Enough, but it goes through different, things like enough food, enough love, and it's kind of in a world where we're seeking more all the time. He's sort of teaching us how to be happy with what we have already, and not to be constantly seeking more. And I guess to really understand what enough actually means, and clearly defining that for ourselves. So I think that was, one of my favorite books that really, it's the kind of book I go back to again and again.
Thank you so much. It sounds like definitely something I should put onto my reading list as well.
Definitely do. Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Eva, for coming onto the show. I'm going to show our watchers and listeners also, the list of how we can get in contact with you. So listening to your podcast, to your website, and also on LinkedIn. I will have all of that information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me as your guest today, Karin. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!